Hello and welcome to this video. On this video, I'm going to be ranking the 70s albums of Billy Cobham. Billy Cobham, of course, came to prominence firstly with Miles Davis on the album Jack Johnson, and then formed the Mahavishnu Orchestra with John McLaughlin, became a sort of worldwide phenomenon, and his sort of machine gun style drum fills at lightning speed combined with a sort of additive rhythmical approach to odd time signatures became the signature drum sound of jazz rock fusion, going on to influence many progressive rock drummers and heavy metal drummers. He is perhaps my biggest influence, I would say. If there's one drummer that has brought me here talking to you, it would be Billy Cobham. After I saw him on a BBC drum masterclass that BBC Two put on in the early 1980s. And when I saw that, even though I was enthralled by the new wave of British heavy metal, I knew I was looking at one of the greatest drummers on the planet. In 1973, he released his first solo album, Spectrum. And with that came out a series of solo albums, which I feel is one of the greatest runs consistently of jazz rock in the 1970s. And because it's a drummer's solo album discography, does not get, I think, the focus that it deserves compared to things like Weather Report or the Mahavishnu Orchestra or Return to Forever. I'm going to be changing that. All these albums are absolutely fantastic. There's no duds here. There's no there's no entry that you're going to be able to get all excited about because I'm really going to run it down. This is all wonderful stuff. We are going to be looking from 1973 Spectrum all the way up to 1979's BC. There's some wonderful albums I nearly wanted to include in the early 80s. The live album Smoking, which I love. We'll talk about that in a bit. And Observations from this around about the same time. Both great albums. But both of those do not quite compare to this run here. So I've ranked them. Okay? I will be talking about the live albums that came out. There's 3 live albums as well that came out in the 1970s. I'll be talking about those, but I haven't included them in the main ranking. I will talk about those and do a sub-ranking, and I will talk about where I would place them on the grand scheme of things as well. So this is going to be, for anybody who's interested in exploring Billy Cobham or exploring Billy Cobham more in the 1970s, this video will be very useful for you, and I'm hoping to unearth some absolute classics. Right, so before we kick off, I would just like to say I am sat in a new part of my studio that I'm trying to pull together at the moment. And what that involves is pulling all the vinyl albums that I own, all the CDs together, and a whole bunch of other stuff, mini discs and all sorts of things I'm trying to pull together. And it will all be housed in this place, everything together, and it will all be alphabetized, which means I will be able to create videos that are going to be even more stream of consciousness, where I'm just pulling albums out from my collection. And I will be making a lot of videos that explore my collection and some of the sort of favorite albums I've got, some of the anomalies. And so I'm very excited about that. So if you're wondering why we've got this sort of empty CD case here, that's because I've got to do now the quite daunting task of going all through my house and pulling every CD out, because believe it or not, my records and CDs are not stored in one place. The records you used to see in the old videos was just it was a good probably 8/10 of the collection, but there's another 20% around there somewhere that I've got to find in various places. So very excited about that. But I thought I wanted to broadcast from this end of the thing so we could get into it and see what's going on. So, shall we just kick off straight away? Straight away. You're 4 minutes in, Andy. You're always waffling, you are. Right, let's start with this ranking of Cobham's studio albums from the 1970s. So, we are talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 albums. So at number 9, I have Simplicity of Expression, Depth of Thought. And this comes from 1978. One of the things that's interesting about Billy Cobham, he's making full out fusion albums, right? There's no Fusak involved. There's no, trying to write a hit. Herbie Hancock's doing that. Stanley Clarke's doing that. By 75, 76, they're all thinking along those lines. And Cobham really doesn't do that till, I would say, 1978 with this album, Simplicity of Expression, Depth of Thought. This is an absolutely wonderful album. Cobham at this point has really codified his drum approach. It's so Billy Cobham-y by this point. The virtuosity is off the scale, and he's also been able to nail the drum sound. I don't think the studios in the early days could really cope with this huge kit with all these drums on it, 2 bass drums, all resonating. It required a different thought process. You know, when you listen to Billy Cobham on The Inner Mountain Flame, it doesn't sound like Billy Cobham. And although Ken Scott gets there on Birds of Fire, it's actually quite a strange drum sound when you listen to that. This is incredible. Cobham is off the scale. And on here, there is a lot of full out fusion. But there's also a sort of, there's songs on here, things like Belinas, which feature a singer called, I believe, Kamal. Beautiful voice. I really love this stuff. You see, the thing with me, I love Earth, Wind and Fire. I love soul. I love Stevie Wonder. I love it. I don't talk about it enough on my channel here, but if I'm listening to something in the car, it's probably something that's funky and soulful. That's what I listen to now, really. So I love all this stuff. Cobham plays brilliant on it. The production's wonderful. We've got strings on there. It's wonderful stuff. This never veers towards disco, which some of you will be going, well, that's good, isn't it? Well, I like when Billy gets a bit funky. It's much more sort of light Latin pop music almost, but there's heavyweight playing on there. It's a wonderful album. It's one of my favorite albums by Billy Cobham, and I've got a lot of albums by Billy Cobham, and that's where we start. This is by no means a bad album. Simplicity of Expression, Depth of Thought. That's my number 9. At number 8, I have the follow-up to this and the last album he made in the 1970s, which is simply called BC. Now, this is the point where he goes full-on disco, especially on the track, What Is Your Fantasy? Now, What Is Your Fantasy, for me, is one of the greatest tunes of all time. When I was a kid, I bought the best of Billy Cobham, and it was a Columbia best of, because he starts off on Atlantic Records, and this second wave of the late 70s albums is on Columbia Records, so it pulled across all those. And there was some great stuff on that compilation album, but there was this track, What Is Your Fantasy? And I was into funk. I was buying, Rose Royce albums, and I was buying Earth, Wind and Fire albums, and I was trying to find where the funk was. But so often I would find the heavy funk on jazz, rock and fusion albums. And this is an example. I'm not a big fan of Fusak. When it starts to sound like the TV theme to Taxi or something, it's not so much my thing. But when you've got heavy funk like this, now this album is just, there's a sense of humour on this. Billy's trying to write something commercial. He's got a good budget from Columbia. There's these huge string sections. The productions is off the scale. But there's a sense of humour that runs through this, which for me allows him to do whatever he wants to do. Once the musician's gone, look, we're just having fun. This album is a load of fun. The production is incredible. His drum sound is incredible. There is instrumental jazz fusion tracks on here, which really burn. There's comedy tracks. And the side one, the production and what's going on in the drums is just absolutely fantastic. I love this album so much. It was really hard for me to get hold of. I've only got a vinyl copy quite recently. And I've only been able to really explore this full album when it was put up on Spotify. So coming up, I never really heard this album that much. I assumed from that one track that it was probably just an album of disco records, a little bit like Herbie Hancock's late 70s albums, but it's not. Cobham never gives up the jazz rock fusion. He's always burning on every one of these albums, right? There's a wonderful compilation that could be made by stitching together the big epics. He often will finish an album with an epic full-on jazz fusion track. and it'd be wonderful to pull those things together. Right. At number 7, I have from 1975 the album A Funky Thide of Sings. Now, A Funky Thide of Sings is like one of the last albums he made. I think it's the second to last album he made on Atlantic Records. His Atlantic Records period is basically, he comes out with Spectrum. Spectrum is one of a kind. Tommy Bolin on guitar, Jan Hammer on keyboards. It's one of a kind. And then he forms the Billy Cobham Band. And what he does is he takes the Mavish Nuxtra and he combines it with that sort of big, the brass sound of Blood, Sweats and Tears in Chicago's and Dreams, which he was a member of. So it's like Mavish Nuxtra and Dreams put together, and they make a number of albums through that period, quite a few. The lineup changes a little bit, but there's definite brass sound in there. It starts off full on fusion with Crosswinds, but as we move through it, we arrive at this album, A Funky Thide of Sings. Now, the thing with Billy Cobham is when he starts making solo albums, one of his great breakthroughs for music, perhaps his greatest breakthrough, he is one of the few jazz rock artists to move slightly away from the sort of out there post-Hendrix prog of the Mavish Orchestra to taking that sound and mixing it with funk. Once you mix that with funk, you really have sort of the idea of jazz rock fusion. Herbie Hancock also does this in 1974 on his Headhunters album. But Cobham's really doing it in 1973, so he may well be the guy that really codifies this. Now, the thing is, you can go back to early future, right back to 67, there's funky beats, combined with jazz soloing, but I'm not on about that. I'm on about a certain way of improvising, a certain way of burning, which is very funky. This sort of brass-inspired group in 75 ends up making this album, A Funky Thide of Sings. Now, this group contains the Brecker brothers, of course, and that is a key aspect to these first albums, is Randy Brecker and Michael Brecker's solos. I mean, this is where I came to become in awe of Michael Brecker as one of the greatest soloists of the 20th century, was his work in the Billy Cobham Band. Here, they really are exploring a funky sound. We even get some skunk funk on here, written by the Brecker brothers. And then, of course, the Brecker brothers in 75, they jump ship, they form the Brecker brothers, and then they carry on in this vein that is explored on this. If you like early Brecker brothers, this is like the Brecker brothers with Billy Cobham on drums, which of course is better, right? A Funky Thide of Sings is a wonderful album. It's not got quite the breadth of musical activity as the previous albums before it, but this, I would say, is an essential jazz rock album from the 70s. BC and Simplicity of Expression are great albums, but they do contain a lot of songs and stuff like that. They're non-essential. Great, but non-essential. Everything from now on is an essential jazz rock album. If you want to have a jazz rock collection with all the best jazz rock in, you would need to have every one of these. Right, so at number 6, I have one of the underrated Cobham albums. This, for me, is one of the greatest jazz rock albums ever made. I bought it when I was very young, and I was completely enamored with it. For me, it's up there as one of the great Billy Cobham albums. When I first put this list up, I thought this is going to come in at number 3 for me and shock everybody. It was only when I went back and listened to all the other albums again and started to realise there was a couple of others that I really need to explore. At number 6, I've got Magic. Magic came out in 1977. This is a wonderful album in which Billy Cobham pioneers a jazz rock sound which is unique. He never went back there again. He never did it before. I don't think anybody else did it. Rather than saxophone, he has clarinet on here. Is it Alvin Batiste? He's got Joachim Kuhn on keyboards, who's wonderful. I believe we've got Sheila Ree on percussion, very young Sheila Ree on this album. Magic is quirky and idiosyncratic in its sound. It sounds just, it's very hard to describe. There's a little bit of sort of Eastern European, sort of Bulgarian wedding bands, Ivo Papazov sound with the clarinet. There's very jaunty sound to it. And so we have Peter Marnow on guitar. His guitar playing is incredible. When I was coming up, because I love this album so Peter Marnow was one of the jazz rock guitarists. I don't know what else he did. Don't think I've ever mentioned him on this channel before. The thing I love about this album is have the very strong compositions on a Magic copyright, incredible, Anteriors of Start, incredible. And when they start off, they're quirky and strange, but when it gets to the soloing, quite rare for a studio album, it takes off. Joachim Kuhn's very sort of McCoy Tyner in his piano playing is sort of, we get this harmonic, sort of explosion. And Peter Marnow is just all over the place. And he's one of the first guitarists that's really playing outside on a jazz rock album. Can you think of anybody that's really playing outside in 1977? Perhaps Schofield, I don't know. But it was a shock. When I first heard him as a young guy, I was like, why? What? He seems like he's playing out of tune. What's going on? And I had to listen to it to get it. We also have the incredible Puffin stuff on here, which again is a very, very quirky and strange tune. It's Billy Cobham's ode. It's his anti-marijuana tune, Of course, when I was growing up, Puffin stuff was that Dragon. So I thought it would be about that, but it's not. And Billy Cobham raps on here. He raps about the dangers of marijuana, right? And it's one of the best fusion tracks ever made. And when it takes off and Peter Marnow burns in with that guitar solo, it's just incredible. But, it's one of the great musical achievements of the 20th century, is when Cobham's going, Buffing stuff, that smoky stuff, got to be thinking in the mind and thinking it can pull to the can do it around me. Good God, and then I have this tune. This tune I love so much. It was up there with Birds of Fire. It was up there with Black Market. Puffing Stuff is just one of my favourite tracks of all time. I love the quirkiness of it. Magic. I know everyone's going to be saying this. They go, Magic is an undeniable forgotten jazz rock classic from 1977. What could better that? Well, I have to be honest, from 1976, the year before, we've got Life and Times. This is the follow-up to Funky Thide sings, and here he changes the lineup. He brings in George Duke on keyboards, who I think has got a pseudonym like Dwalin Jigwangi or something I can't pronounce strange words because I'm British. And it's got the great Doug Rausch on bass. Doug Rausch was a bassist that emerged in the early 70s. He got the bass gig with Carlos Santana. And then he played on a number of fusion albums. And he should have gone down in history again. Another one of these players that, with that sort of double thumb technique that he pioneered, that Victor Wooten came and sort of got famous for. He's always bringing in these incredible bass lines. He died very young, I think at 28 years old in 1978 from a heroin overdose, and has been forgotten. But I will always champion Doug Rausch, and he's great on this. Life and Times is actually a return to the sort of aggressive Mahavishnu sound. If you really want to hear something close to the Mahavishnu by Billy Cobham, it's this album, because it's pared down, and the guitar of Schofield, who is playing in a much more aggressive style that he became known for, he really is burning on this. And that sort of bass guitar, keyboards, drums sound that's on here is very reminiscent. It is a heavy album. It's a strange album that Cobham returned to this after making Funky Thide sings. Obviously, in 1976, he could have easily have his eyes on disco like Stanley Clarke and Herbie Hancock were doing, but he didn't. This is a really heavy album. It was an album I ignored coming up a little bit. I always had it, but I don't know why I didn't listen to it. And I think it's because it could be argued with this sort of more basic lineup, there isn't a characteristic sound on this. Spectrum has a characteristic sound. The Brecker Brothers band has a characteristic sound. The ones with the songs on have a characteristic sound, and Magic has a sound all of its own. Now I'm here, my personal opinion is to stick Magic above Life and Times, but this album burns. And if you want to hear George Duke playing in a jazz rock context where it's really heavy, go and get this album. It's absolutely wonderful. Of course, this sees the sort of almost like a partnership between George Duke and Billy Cobham. We also see a partnership with Stanley Clarke and Billy Cobham, Stanley Clarke and George Duke, but we never really see a partnership of Billy Cobham, George Duke and Stanley Clarke, do we? I know they're all together on Life is But a Game off the School Days album, but wouldn't that have been the band? Really? Wouldn't that have been the greatest fusion band of all time? Duke, Clarke, Cobham, and then who would we stuck on guitar? Alan Holdsworth. There is a bootleg album of Cobham and Holdsworth. I was listening to the other day. It's not great quality, but it's very interesting to hear them together. I could go off on a tangent here about the imagining Holdsworth and Cobham together. An interesting thing, is there any other sessions out there with Holdsworth and Cobham on together? You know. Right. This is the real underrated classic for me. This is the outsider there on mentions. And I've got this at number 4, right? Now, on this list of albums, the only one I don't own is this album. And I didn't know it very well. So I listened to it for this ranking. The album's called Inner Conflicts. And it came out the same year as Simplicity of Expression. So you know when he's making that sort of music to a much more poppier sound with vocals in 78. He also records this other album called Inner Conflicts. And it has a very similar cover. So similar that when I was younger, I thought that they were the same album. So when I bought Simplicity of Expression, because I was a Cobham completist, when I went out, not having any books to look at, I would flick through, see this album, think, oh, I've got that one. All right. Now looking back on it, in 78, he did 2 things. He brought 2 albums out. One's called Simplicity of Expression. That is his song-based album. Simplicity of Expression. He's saying what he's doing. This one's called Inner Conflicts. And this is full-on fusion. And this has an aspect of Billy Cobham solo which none of the other albums have. Yes, it's fiery, but it's also very contemplative. It's very heavy. It's very sort of spiritual in its sound almost. I did not realize how heavy this album is. It's absolutely incredible. It's coming in at number 4 on this list, right? This is one of the underrated classic jazz rock albums from the 70s. Underrated by me, right? This is why we do this channel. This is what I discovered, because it's a wonderful job I've got. You know, I go home, edit my videos, and then I start listing. And I start going through different albums, listening to them, comparing it, having to think, what do I want to do next? And a lot of the time, it's a chore to go listening to all this music. You're tired, but you think, I'm going to listen to it. But with this, every now and then, you put an album on. So I wonder what this Inner Conflicts is like. I've never really listened to it. I know a couple of the tracks off it, but never really listened to it. And I think also it occupies a changeover with Cobham. I put it on and I was just like, whoa. It also has this 10-minute drum solo. You often get a drum solo on a Billy Cobham album. This is the best one because basically he's gone into the studio with a whole bunch of electronic drums and synthesis and all this type of stuff. And he's created this 10-minute drum solo. I love Cobham when he does a drum solo, which isn't just a burning drum solo, where it's got sort of a logic and coherence, and it's basically a piece of music with drums in it. This is wonderful stuff. It sounds like some mad electronica, you know, from 1978. I tell you what it sounds like. I don't know if they're using the same synthesizer, as they used on the theme to Monkey. You know, Monkey? Monkey is funky. You know that? I love that tune. I love the series Monkey. For me, Monkey is it's like jazz rock of television. But at the beginning, there's that incredible sequence that I've never been able to use on my channel. I've tried to, but it always blocks it when monkeys are born. And as Monkey's born, he comes out and he's an egg, and this egg rolls across this sort of prehistoric landscape where you can see the world's just being formed. And then the egg gets like the lightning, and then suddenly Monkey just explodes of it. You know why? Because the nature of Monkey is irrepressible. Well, that music that accompanies this sounds like inner conflicts. Yes, this is a tenuous part, but I want to have a channel where this sort of information is imparted. For me, there is a relationship between inner conflicts and that opening music to Monkey, not the disco track that comes in later on. Right, so we now have the last three, and this is going to be massively contentious to just run-of-the-mill jazz rock fans who think they know what they're talking about. But I know what I'm talking about here. Listen to what I'm about to say, because you're not going to like this. At number 3, I have Spectrum. That's impossible. I've got Spectrum at number 3, not even at number 2. Spectrum went in at number 1 when I started this list, and then I had to really think about it. Spectrum's wonderful. This is a masterpiece of fusion. There's 2 bands on here. This often gets forgotten. There is the semblance of a sort of brass-heavy band with, I believe, it's Joe Farrell on sax, isn't it? It could be Woody Shaw on trumpet or flugelhorn, and they do the tune Spectrum, which is in 7, absolutely incredible, and I think they do the Liz. The other tracks here is by one of the sort of greatest one-off jazz fusion lineups of all time. Billy Cobham on drums, Layla Sklar on bass, the bloke with the big beard, and then the incredible pairing of Tommy Bolin and Jan Hammer. And this stuff's incredible. And yes, Quadrant 4, and yes, Stratus, those 2 tracks are 2 of the greatest tracks of all time. When we sent that Voyager out into space and they put a recording on there, they probably put Beethoven's 5th Symphony, a bit of Dylan, or I don't know, something that no alien wants to listen to. They should have stuck Quadrant 4. Could you imagine being an alien and you find Voyager and you open it up and go, what's this tune? And you finally work out how it does it, you put it on, and then, and what Tommy Bolin's doing there, I'm sure they would have understood. It's incredible stuff. All the other stuff's incredible. Red Baron's amazing. And I mentioned this album on another list, and I didn't make it number 1. And someone says, how can you not put this at number 1? Tommy Bolin's guitar solo on Red Baron is amazing. Yes, it is. But it's not as amazing as Dean Brown's guitar solo on Smoking from 1982, the live album. And now I've mentioned that album. The Red Baron on there is incredible. And for me, always eclipsed the Red Baron here. So I was a little bit like, Red Baron is cool, but it's not as good as a Smoking version. We've got some drum solos on here in between the tracks. They're very interesting. But for me, it's not top-end Cobham soloing on the follow-up album, Crosswinds, when he does Storm. That's way better. So the drum solos are cool. They're very dry. You've got... Is it called Searching for the Backstage Door? I won't go through them. I mean, I could do a whole video just on those solos. I mean, I nicked everything out of them. I copied all the licks because I could hear them. So they're very important for me. But I don't think that is top-end Cobham either. So we really come down to the main tracks for me. Now, everyone's going to say, how can you say Red Baron's a classic? It is. But Red Baron is better on Smoking. You ever listen to it, it just burns. Whereas for me, Red Baron was always on the album a little bit like, oh yeah, it's been an amazing album. Now we're going to relax and just have this, this little bit of a jam at the end over a 2/5 chord progression. The Liz is very pretty, but it's Spectrum, Quadrant 4, and Stratus. Tori the Matador's pretty heavy as well. These are great. I mean, we're talking masterpiece, but I can see that when we move to the albums above it, these albums are absolutely consistently brilliant all the way through. I know where the criticisms are going to be, right? But I'm going to try and argue it on this video. So at number 2, I've got Total Eclipse. I know everybody who went, oh, he's put Spectrum at number 3. Never mind, he'll have Total Eclipse at number 1. Total Eclipse is so mind-warpingly proggy. It's so mind-warpingly sort of science fiction-y. It's so mind-warpingly out there. It's anybody who knows their jazz rock will know that Total Eclipse is the heaviest of Cobham's albums. Right, this is full on. Okay, absolutely full on. The opening track, which I think is called Solarization, is like a little mini prog epic, and it's got modern classical sections in, and tonal bits in there. The soloists are off the scale on this album. I think is it Milko Lviviev on keyboards. He's amazing. Very European modern classical sound. Of course, Brecker is just incredible. On the track Total Eclipse, is that the track then? What's the long one? Or was it Sea of Tranquility? I mean, I've always been interested that the fact that one of the big YouTubes here, you know, is Sea of Tranquility, and really their theme should be Sea of Tranquility by Billy Cobham. This is full of so much stuff, and there's a few funky things on here as well. Now, I agree with people who have said the trouble with these albums is John Abercrombie. I have said myself that I'm a little dubious about John Abercrombie, and that I realise is influenced not so much by his later ECM work, which is really fantastic. It's because the John Abercrombie I know is on these too. Going back to this now, John Abercrombie is perhaps one of the few guitarists at that time that could negotiate these charts. And so his actual playing on a whole, it's so incredible when you listen to the part play. When you listen to the guitar solos, he does explore some really strange stuff. And on this album, he is a little bit wah-wah, you know, dependent perhaps on this. But it's such a minor moan. But it's the moan that places the album I've got also from 1974 at number 1, which of course, if you know me, is going to be Crosswinds. Crosswinds just sounds so beautiful. The production is wonderful. Where Total Eclipse is about space, this is about a sort of hot, humid weather that you would get down in Panama or where Billy Cobham was born. You know, it's like it feels like Cobham's got an ancient, you know, early memory of a sort of weather condition, and it floats in. You put this album on and the wind starts up and you feel it, and then this band floats in, and it's so relaxed. It's not the Mavic structure, it's so relaxed, but the rhythms are so complex. It comes in with this relaxed 17, 16. And the way it's written, it's so more sophisticated than anything on Spectrum. And you get the sort of melody is distributed around the band. And it's all like this. It's so incredible. It's some of the greatest drumming, right? Then we go into this. I think it's called. Is it called Spanish Moss? I can't remember the title, but the second track, he brings it down to this beautiful ballad, and it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. Right, we're seeing things that no jazz fusion musician's done. Cobham's composition here, and the compositions are great on Spectrum, but here, he is now orchestrating for this band with all this brass. It's incredible. It's absolute. Listen to the Cobham's compositions. He is so underrated as a composer. Even though we know he's written all these classic things, even though things like Red Baron are in the real book, but this is where it's at. Nobody's done anything like this, right? Then you get Storm, and Storm is a drum solo which tries to evoke into this hot sort of atmospheric sort of Caribbean type of tropical atmosphere. You can feel the heat and the relaxation, and then this storm starts up. And we hear the thunder and lightning. It's in Billy's drums. Think of who else has ever done a sidelong epic like this. It's like Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. It contains this weather conditions over a sort of 20-minute period. And after we've had this storm, there's a flash flood. And they go back to the original sound, the relaxed sound at the start that he returns to, back to 1716. And yet this is the most brutal out there fusion you've ever heard. As a kid, when I got this album, and I was very young, this is one of the first jazz rock albums I had, and it's probably why I love it so much. I did not know what was going on. It took me a long time to really work out what was happening rhythmically on this. As a young kid that had been listening to AC/DC and a bit of Cozy Powell, to have to try and get my head around this, not knowing what time signatures were, not knowing what additive time was, not understanding Billy Cobham's method of sort of having these multiple, tempos acting in a certain way and the way he subdivided it, and all the way the counts changed. And in the end, I had to work out what was going on. My mum and dad had this thing that you would have. I don't know why they had it, but my mum and dad seemed to have everything in case of an emergency. You know what 70s parents are like. And they had this little thing that you would click if you were counting people walking into a room, say if you were a security man. And you'd click, count, like that. And then you'd look at, say, 300 people in the room. My dad probably had it because it made him counting things easier. I don't know. But he had this thing. So what I started to do was I would tap it along with the track. When it came to a bar, I'd stop and I'd look at the number and then I'd do it again because these numbers were all different, but it averaged out to 17. I wouldn't accept that this tune was in a count of 17. I couldn't even understand how it could be 17. I tried to count 17 across, it didn't work. I learnt to drum by this track. Now, when you flip it over, you then get The Pleasant Pheasant, which for me is the funkiest track ever written. It contains one of the great funky saxophone solos of all time. It's got a brilliant George Duke keyboard solo, which is so relaxed. We've got a conga solo, and then we have what is the greatest drum solo over a form, because this is basically a blues. It's the greatest solo over a form by any drummer in the history of mankind, right? This is followed up by Heather. Now, I believe Heather was written by Billy when he visited Hiroshima. And this is so beautiful. It's so moving. It's just such an incredible composition. It's so much way beyond even the Mavic structure in terms of the melody. Heather is just one of the great tracks. And in this, Michael Brecker does his second solo on the album. And it sounds like he's walking into the room. He starts off and you hear the saxophone come in. When I was a kid, I'd read an interview with Alan Holdsworth, and he said, "Who are your two favourite solos?" And Alan Holdsworth said, "Well, it's Michael Brecker and Keith Jarrett." And I went, "Oh, I think I've heard that name, Michael Brecker. He's on that Crosswinds album." And I went, "Oh, he does a saxophone solo on Pleasant Pheasant. Oh my God, he's amazing." And then it had got the solos listed on the back. I said, "Oh, he also plays on Heather." So I listened to it again, focusing on this. I'm 13 years old, focusing on Brecker. And I was like, oh my God. And then at the end, we get Crosswinds. Now that's Red Baron times 10. And in this, Abercrombie comes up with the goods. He's amazing, right? He's out there, he's Larry, but God, he's amazing. Crosswinds is Billy Cobham's greatest album. And this is one of the greatest jazz rock albums of all time from the 70s. Now we've got 3 live albums. Shabazz, A Live Mother for You, and Live on Tour in Europe. They're all great, absolutely great. The one I would put at the bottom, and it's still wonderful, is Live on Tour in Europe, which he did with George Duke. Partly why this is the third one is because of the bloody cover. It gives you the willies. I've done a whole video just talking about this bloody cover. What were they thinking? Right, when I was a kid, I never bought it. I thought, I'm not buying an album like that. What's going on there? It's nightmare fuel. What were they doing? So I never would normally do this, but I'm downgrading just based upon the album. The other thing that I'm not keen on this album is the funny bit by George Duke. I'm all for a bit of funny stuff, right? Cobham does it on BC, but George Duke, I don't really know what's going on about here. It just seems to go on. There's no music. It's just, I don't know why they put it on there. The rest of it's absolutely wonderful. Schofield's great. Alphonso Johnson's great. Mustafa by Alphonso Johnson is just incredible. It's such a brilliant, out there, quirky tune. So this is great, but I think it's eclipsed a little bit by A Live Mother for You, which is a very similar sort of thing. Live on Tour in Europe was released by this band that they put together, Alphonso Johnson, Schofield, George Duke, Billy Cobham. A Live Mother for You is another supergroup, which I believe had got Alphonso Johnson, but this time Steve Kahn. Can't remember who was on keyboards on this one. Is it George Duke again? Don't think it is it? My brain wants to say Mark Soskin, but I don't know if that's a name. I can't remember. Sorry. You all can put it in the comments. A Live Mother for You is just a little bit more brutal. It's they really are played. All Cobham's live albums, they really play. And the thing about this one is Steve Kahn is one of the great fusion guitarists from the 1970s. He's a brilliant composer, and his solo albums that he came out, things like Blue Man and Tightrope, they're just brilliant in terms of their composition. But Steve Kahn is really thinking about the composition, I feel. If you want to hear him in a live set in Burning, which he can do, this one is the definitive Steve Kahn album. Now, Steve Kahn has dropped a couple of comments here. So if he sees this, he might look at it because he might think, oh, I played on that. And you bloody did, Mr. Kahn. And I send you my love and blessings. What an absolute legend. Can't believe these people, come on and put, people that lived in my head. So, of course, at number one, I've got Shabazz. And Shabazz is the live album from the Brecker, Randy Brecker, Michael Brecker band. Recorded in 1974 on tour. I think there's one track from The Rainbow. The rest is from Montreux Jazz Festival, I think. Right. This album, I never liked as a kid. I was just nuts over Crosswinds. I was nuts over Total Eclipse. I got Shabazz. I was so excited about it. The cover was brilliant. Billy Cobham, like all black and white, cool. And I took it home. I never liked it. You know why? It was too out there for me. In terms of improvisation, in terms of his drumming, this is so out there. I can remember having a conversation with one of the UK's greatest drummers of all time, Mark Mondesir, and he said that for him it was Shabazz. This is an out there album. This is really the sort of, like when you buy a Mavish Orchestra live album or the live bootleg and you go, God, the tracks on the studio is pretty out there, but this is something else that's just been taken apart. This is just a brutal excursion into aiming at the horizon and just going, whoa, we're going. We're heading for the sun and we don't care. That's what this is. It's like if you crossed Chicago with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. So I've got to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that. I did enjoy that one very much. I'm in drum mode now. I'm going to do the 10 greatest British drummers next, based upon actual skill, actual chops, and actual musicality. I love when I do those. It always upsets everybody. So that's the one I'm about to do next. So that will probably be coming out tomorrow. So if you want to see that and get reminded, then obviously click subscribe. Stick a like on this as well, please. If you could just do that now, that would be great. If you want to support me in what I'm doing, I've got a Patreon. You can become a free member and you can become a paid up member. I'm about to do something with my Patreon, which I think is going to be amazing. I've been quite quiet on there. The patrons have lived, they haven't had that many dropouts, which I'm very grateful for. But I'm going to do something today or tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to announce it when I announce it. And I think it's just the obvious, logical thing for my patron. It's the most logical thing. Anyway, that is it. PayPal tip jar, if you want to put a financial remuneration in there, that would be great. You can see it all there. There's links, there's loads of ways. As long as you support me, if you want to support me, I'll be very grateful for it. I don't want to influence you, but it was Father's Day yesterday, and my kids forgot about it. I never got anything for Father's Day, except for Lucy, who I send all my love to, Lucy. Not that she'll ever watch this, because she's got very little interest, especially with the little one herself, in the albums of Billy Cobham. But I know you lot have, and I hope you appreciate this. This month, I'm getting back to doing what we do on this channel. Once these albums are in there, we're returning back to the prog, we're returning back to the fusion, we're even returning back to the avant-garde. It's all going to be, because I know you've been thinking, oh, he's just going on about how rubbish classic rock is, he's pulling everything down. No, I've got the views up. Right, the channel's up here. I now can surf down to obscurity by talking about the music we love. So that's what you're going to get, hardcore fans. It's going to be great this month. When I get to the end, I'll be back to saying who the most overrated, I don't know, album artwork is of all time. But for now, we're done. I'm finished. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Susie and Peppa are in a secret club.
It's a shame you can't go and see a proper prog gig or a proper heavy jazz fusion gig. It's a shame you can't sit down on an afternoon, have a nice cup of tea. So you don't have to be staying up till 11, 12 o'clock at night. You know, all that rubbish you have to do. Yeah. Come out, you have to park your car, you get home, you've got to work the next day, you know, Sunday afternoon. Isn't there any way we could go and see a gig?
While the Sunday club calls, embrace the sound of your dreams. Join up in crafting the magic. Together we're bursting the seams.
The hood, the gangster.
It's running. Would you? Gonna play in a minute.
Electron ain't no fun. Genesis, they take the piss. ELP, not for me. Brilliant, just isn't fun.
That I really know my prog, so they will listen to me when I come on and tell you that you need to become a patron. That's the easiest way of doing it. You can buy tickets online, there's all those links are up, but I think in the long term the best way to get involved in the Sunday Club is to become a patron. Free member, you can have a think about it, see what's going on, and just get yourself over there, and if you can, sign yourself up to the live stream, because I think it's going to be a very important way of opening up new avenues for progressive rock, and so that we can keep the thing alive, and that bands that would normally only be able to sell 10 tickets in any town can actually access a worldwide progressive rock audience, which could be 1,000 people. This will spread the word of prog, and before we know it, it won't be dying. You know, as IQ and bloody Marillion get to their last prog gasps, you know, which can't be long. It can't be long, can it? I mean, Steve Rothery's not a healthy chap, is he? I'm actually sat in the, we call it the glass room. It's a part of Jellyman's. It's bigger than my room, a lot longer. Not quite as wide, but a lot longer. Now, if you want to know the sort of bands I've got lined up, the first gig is going to be Orc, which is the band that's been put together by Colin Edwin and Pat Masterletto. So Colin Edwin is the bass player in Porcupine Tree, amongst other things. And the Pat Masterletto is, of course, the legend that played drums with King Crimson and a whole bunch of other people as well. We've also got Solstice lined up for a gig, and we've got Life Signs lined up for a gig, and a whole host of other stuff as well. So this is just a very quick video to let you know that that is coming, and I will have the details for it. And I hope you can all sign up to the live streaming, because once it's here, it will be like a party. It's not going to just be like you can just watch the gig. There will be a lot going on.
In shadows of the vinyl, we gather, we share at the Sunday club. The rhythms are where hips dancing on frets, beat echoes collide. Turn the beat of our hearts, let the spirits ride. In melodies unfolding, complexity's grace, we find our connection in this sacred space. While the Sunday club calls, embrace the sound of your dreams. Join up in crafting the magic. Together we're bursting the seams. Hear the whispers of legends, the stories ignite. The classics reborn on the soft, flickering light. With every note swirling, hear the bond we weave in the tapestry of sound. Believe what you with depths of our souls. The sky up above, this is where progressive hearts gather in love. While the Sunday club calls, embrace the sound of your dreams. Join up in crafting the magic. Together we're bursting the seams. Join the Patreon, don't hesitate now. Where the music meets passion, come take a bow. Each note is a journey, a passage through time. Be a part of the family, together we climb.